of college kids rented a cabin in the woods for the weekend. They had no idea they were being watched by a crazed grizzly bear. As the bear's rage and madness consumes it, the group is forced to fight for their lives and confront the beast that has been terrorizing them. Then they finally rid themselves of the terror that has taken over their lives? Or will the bear's vengeance know no bounds? Find out in The Crazed Grizzly Bear, a heart-pumping tale of survival and terror in the wilderness. The sun was setting over the mountains as a group of college kids arrived at their remote cabin for the weekend. They had planned a relaxing getaway, one filled with hiking, campfires, and maybe even a little bit of partying. As they unpacked their cars and carried their bags inside, they felt a sense of excitement and anticipation for the adventures that awaited them. Little did they know, something lurked in the woods. From the safety of the trees, a grizzly bear observed the group with curious eyes. But this was no ordinary bear. It had been driven mad by years of being hunted and subjected to all kinds of torture and abuse. And now, it had its sights on these unsuspecting college kids. The first night passed without incident, and the group settled in for a good night's sleep after a long day of travel. But as the early morning hours approached, the bear began to make its presence known. It started with small noises outside the cabin, branches snapping, leaves rustling. At first, the group attributed it to the common sounds of the forest and tried to ignore it. But as the noises grew louder and more persistent, it became clear that there was something out there. Chad, the biggest of the group, and arguably the bravest, decided to investigate. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, cautious, yet ready to find the source of the noise. As he shone the light into the darkness, he caught a glimpse of a pair of glowing eyes and a massive, shaggy form. Chad's heart stopped and his blood ran cold as he realized he was face to face with a crazed grizzly bear. The bear let out a deafening roar and charged at him, its claws extended. Chad barely had time to react before he was knocked to the ground, the bear's razor-sharp claws raking across his chest. As the bear stood over him, ready to deliver the final blow, a shot rang out through the stillness of the night. The bear turned to see the group of college kids standing on the porch, armed with whatever weapons they could find: a small pistol, knives, hammers, and even a baseball bat. The bear let out a snarl of frustration and turned to flee, disappearing back into the darkness from whence it came. Chad was rushed inside with serious injuries, and the group got to work trying to help him as much as they could. With the bear still lurking outside in the night, they couldn't take the chance of trying to transfer him to the car. The group knew they couldn't stay at the cabin anymore, especially with Chad in such a dire state. Everyone hurried to pack up their bags, planning to leave at first light and escape the crazed bear. But as they peeked out the blinds, they could still see the bear. They watched as he paced back and forth just at the tree line, watching them and waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. As time passed, one by one, each member of the group began to fall asleep. Once all grew quiet in the cabin, the bear struck again. This time his rage centered on their car. First, he used his massive paws to break the windows, and once inside, he began to destroy everything in sight until the car was unrecognizable. When morning light struck, the group awoke and was ready to make the journey to their car. But as they opened the door, their hearts sank. Their car was ruined, mauled by the crazed grizzly himself. With no other homes for miles and little to no cell phone service in the area, they were trapped. The group began to panic. How were they going to get Chad to the hospital? What if the bear attacked the house? How would anyone know they needed help? They got to work, trying to come up with a plan. They needed to figure out a way to get out of the woods and back to civilization. As they sat and planned, the grizzly bear was never far from their thoughts. They all knew it was still out there, lurking in the woods, waiting for its chance to strike again. The group was lucky enough to have enough food to last a while, and though Chad was still wounded, they were able to come up with some makeshift bandages to keep him alive. As the days passed, the bear began to make its presence known. It started with small acts of destruction. Trees were torn down, trash cans were knocked over, and the occasional glimpse of a massive, shaggy form moving through the trees. The group tried to ignore it, telling themselves it was just bad luck and it was just an ordinary bear looking for food. But they all knew the truth. This was no ordinary bear. This was a beast driven mad by years of abuse and testing, and it seemed to have a personal vendetta against them. One night, they decided they couldn't take it anymore. They gathered in Chad's room, where he was now recuperating from his injuries, and came up with a plan to lure the bear out of hiding and catch it once and for all. They knew it wouldn't be easy. The bear was clever and cunning, and it had proven time and time again that it was more than a match for them. But they were determined to rid themselves of the terror that had taken over their lives. The next morning, they set their plan into action. They gathered all the food they could find and set it out in a clearing near the cabin, hoping to draw the bear out into the open. As they waited, nerves stretched thin, they heard the sound of something approaching through the trees. The bear emerged from the brush, its eyes fixed on the pile of food in front of it. The group sprang into action, setting their trap and hoping for the best. The bear, sensing that something was off, let out a loud growl and swung its massive paw at them. They managed to dodge the attack and get the bear into a makeshift cage they had set up. But as they were securing the lock, the bear let out a deafening roar and broke free. It charged at the group, its eyes filled with rage. They scattered, running in every direction, as the bear chased after them. One by one, it caught them, its claws tearing into their flesh as they screamed in terror. It wasn't until there was only one left that the bear finally stopped its rampage. As it stood panting over the final victim, a young woman named Sarah, it seemed to pause, as if contemplating its next move. And then, with a final snarl, it disappeared back into the woods. Sarah lay there, bleeding and alone, not knowing if she would survive the night. The grizzly bear was still out there, and who knew what horrors it had in store for her next. Sarah lay there in the dirt, her body trembling with fear and her mind racing with thoughts of what could happen next. She knew the grizzly bear was still out there, and she had no way of knowing if it would come back for her. She tried to stay as still as possible, hoping that the bear would think she was dead and leave her alone. But as the minutes ticked by and the bear failed to reappear, she began to wonder if it had truly left or if it was just waiting for the right moment to strike again. As the sun began to rise, Sarah gathered the strength to sit up and take stock of her injuries. She was battered and bruised, and there were deep gashes on her arms and legs, but she was alive. She knew she needed to get help, but the thought of facing the bear again was too much to bear. She decided to stay where she was and wait for someone to come looking for her. As the hours passed, Sarah's strength began to fade. She knew she was losing blood and needed medical attention, but she was too afraid to move. Just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She turned to see a group of park rangers running towards her, their faces etched with concern. Sarah collapsed into their arms, relieved that she had finally been found. As they carried her away to safety, she couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the grizzly bear. Had it truly left, or was it still out there, waiting for its chance to strike again? Sarah knew she may never have the answers, but she vowed to never return to those woods again. As they loaded her into the ambulance and drove away, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the grizzly bear's story was far from over. It was a beast driven by madness and rage, and who knew what it was capable of next. The grizzly bear watched from the safety of the trees as the ambulance drove away, its rage still burning bright. It had come so close to finishing off its final prey, but in the end, it had been thwarted once again by the pesky humans. But the bear was not one to give up easily. It had been driven mad by years of abuse and trauma, and it would stop at nothing until it had its revenge. As the days passed, the bear began to plot its next move. It knew the humans would be back, and when they returned, it would be ready for them. It started by following them, watching their every move and learning their habits. It learned where they lived, where they worked, and where they liked to spend their free time. And then, when the time was right, it struck. It began with small acts of destruction, tearing down fences, breaking windows, and leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The humans were terrified, and they knew the bear was behind it all. But try as they might, they couldn't catch it. It was always one step ahead of them, always just out of reach. As the bear's rampage continued, The humans knew they had to do something. They came up with a plan to lure the bear out of hiding and catch it once and for all. They gathered all the food they could find and set it out in a clearing, hoping to draw the bear out into the open, and when it appeared, they were ready. The bear, sensing that something was off, let out a loud growl and swung its massive paw at them. But this time, the humans were prepared. They managed to dodge the attack and get the bear into the cage they had set up, securing the lock tight. The bear let out a deafening roar, but it was no use. It was finally caught, and this time, it wouldn't be able to escape. The humans breathed a sigh of relief, grateful to finally be rid of the terror that had taken over their lives. They knew it was only a matter of time before the bear was transferred to a new home, far away from their town. As they watched the bear being loaded into the truck, they couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. They knew it was only a matter of time before the bear's madness consumed it completely, and there was nothing they could do to save it. But they also knew that they had done the right thing, for themselves and for the bear. And as the truck drove away, they hoped that wherever the bear ended up, it would finally find the peace it deserved.